mitigasi bencana gempa dan tsunami di Palu, Sulawesi Tengah.
December 26, 2004, began softly along the shores of Indonesia. The sun was still low, casting warm light over fishing boats tied along the beach. Families who had spent Christmas Eve together were beginning to stir, preparing breakfast or gathering near the water. Tourists stepped onto hotel balconies, admiring the glassy calm of the Indian Ocean, unaware that beneath that calm surface, a force older and more powerful than human history had already been unleashed. What would follow in the next hours would become one of the deadliest natural disasters ever recorded, an event that would change entire nations and carve itself permanently into the memory of the world. At 7:58 a.m. local time, along the floor of the Indian Ocean near the island of Sumatra, enormous tectonic plates shifted with violent force. For hundreds of years, pressure had been building silently between the Indo-Australian and Eurasian plates. On that morning, the stress exceeded the breaking point. The seafloor ruptured along a 1,300-kilometer fault line, lifting a massive slab of ocean floor upward by more than 10 meters. This movement displaced billions of tons of water in a matter of seconds. The energy released was equivalent to more than 20,000 atomic bombs. Yet at the surface, along beaches and towns stretching across Asia, the first sign of disaster seemed deceptively gentle. A faint shudder beneath the feet, a tremor that felt like a passing vibration. Some people felt nothing at all. Others paused briefly in their morning routine, sensing only a small rumble before dismissing it. The epicenter was too far offshore for most communities to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. But in the moments after the seafloor tore open, the ocean began to behave in ways that defied all normal patterns. Along the coast of Aceh in northern Indonesia, fishermen noticed the first ominous changes. The water moved strangely, not in waves, but in a slow, unnatural heaving motion. It felt as if the sea itself were inhaling. Birds that normally soared along the shoreline abruptly turned inland. Dogs barked relentlessly and refused to go near the water. These are signs that indigenous communities had understood for generations, but on this morning, even the elders could not comprehend the scale of what was coming. Then the ocean began to pull back. The receding water exposed vast stretches of seabed that had never been seen before. Coral reefs, seaweed forests, and skeletal remains of ancient marine life lay bare under the rising sun. Fish flopped helplessly on the sand, and curious children ran out to collect them. Tourists pointed their cameras at the unbelievable sight. Many people assumed it was a rare natural phenomenon or a low tide. They could not know that the sea was gathering itself for its return. Further offshore, the displaced water formed a massive wave, silent, dark, and rising. It traveled across the ocean at the speed of a commercial jet. Unlike a normal wave, which breaks gently at the crest, a tsunami carries its energy through the entire water column. It becomes a moving wall of destruction, capable of uprooting forests, pulverizing buildings, and sweeping entire towns away in seconds. When the first wave reached the shores of Aceh in northern Indonesia, it did not appear as a cresting breaker. It rose gradually, like a towering, moving platform of water. Then it slammed forward with unimaginable force. Houses were torn from their foundations and carried inland as if they weighed nothing. Cars floated like toys. The roar of the water drowned out screams, cracking timber and collapsing structures. People clung to anything they could: tree trunks, floating debris, pieces of rooftops, realizing instantly that they were fighting for their lives. Within minutes, entire blocks of Banda Aceh disappeared beneath churning, debris-filled water. A mother, holding her son, tried to climb to the second floor of her home, only to feel the surge knock them both under. She managed to grip a window frame while waves battered her body, but the current ripped her son from her arms. A fisherman who had spent decades on the water found himself thrown into a violent whirlpool of debris. He survived only because he managed to grasp a large piece of wood as he was swept through the remains of his neighborhood. The tsunami did not behave like a single wave. It came in multiple surges, each one carrying more debris, more destruction, and more force. After the first wave receded, people stumbled through muddy water, believing the worst was over. But within minutes, a second wave surged inland, higher and more violent than the first. Many who had survived the initial strike were swept away in the second assault. By the time the wave reached Sri Lanka, it had traveled thousands of kilometers but had lost none of its power. In the town of Peralaya, one of the most tragic events of the disaster unfolded when the tsunami struck a passenger train, carrying hundreds of people. The force of the water lifted the train off its tracks and hurled it into nearby homes, trapping passengers inside carriages that quickly filled with water. Families clung to each other in darkness as the train shifted and buckled under the pressure. Rescuers later described it as one of the deadliest railway disasters in history, caused not by human error, but by the unstoppable force of the ocean. On the coast of India, fishing villages were obliterated. People awoke to the sound of crashing water and fled barefoot through streets that had turned into rivers. Mothers, searching for their missing children, screamed into the air, calling names that were swallowed by the noise of the waves. In Tamil Nadu, entire neighborhoods were flattened. Boats were thrown onto roads and rooftops. Marketplaces, houses, and temples were washed away in minutes. In Thailand, on the holiday island of Phuket, tourists were enjoying breakfast on the beach when the ocean suddenly surged upward. Some saw the water rising far offshore and mistook it for a storm. Others stood frozen in disbelief as the sea transformed into a moving wall. One father grabbed his daughter and sprinted through a hotel lobby as the windows shattered and water poured inside. Large beachfront resorts flooded within seconds. Video footage from that day shows people running desperately through swirling water, trying to reach higher ground as furniture, vehicles, and debris crashed around them. The tsunami continued its path westward, reaching the Maldives, Somalia, and even the coast of Kenya. Its reach was so vast that nations separated by thousands of kilometers suffered the same catastrophe within hours of each other. Never before had a single seismic event caused such widespread, simultaneous destruction across so many countries. When the water finally receded, the world saw the scope of the disaster. Vast areas were unrecognizable. Houses had been reduced to fragments. Boats lay stranded far inland. Roads were destroyed. Farmlands were coated in salt water and mud. Everywhere, survivors stumbled among ruins searching for family members, calling out names into an air filled with dust and grief. Some found their loved ones. Others found objects that belonged to them: shoes, toys, clothing, haunting reminders of lives swept away. More than 230,000 people lost their lives. Millions were displaced. Entire communities vanished. The Indian Ocean tsunami became one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history. In the days that followed, rescue teams from around the world arrived to search through debris. Medical workers treated the injured in makeshift clinics. Aid organizations set up shelters for people who had lost everything. But the emotional scars remained long after the physical ruins were cleared. Survivors carried memories of the morning when the sea retreated like a whisper and returned like a monster, reshaping their world forever.